Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is Station. We're ready for the event.
Will Robinson-Smith, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now. How do you hear me?
Hello, Will. We've got you loud and clear. How us?
Excellent. Well, it is very wonderful for both of you to be able to join us today. Really appreciate you taking some time out of an extremely busy schedule, as it always is for the crew on board the International Space Station. And, you know, it's been just about 3 weeks since you launched from Pad 40 as we're sitting here at the Kennedy Space Center. It's just beyond the tree line from our vantage point. It was a spectacular launch. You've been there for just a few weeks, but Sophie, I want to start with you because you shared this really nice picture on your ascent to the International Space Station of all four of you looking out the window of your Dragon capsule back down at the Earth below. And this is the first time that you and Jack have had the opportunity to experience the overview effect. I wonder, what were you imagining in that moment?
Literally, it was mind-blowing. It was magical. It's very hard to describe, but for me, it was a feeling of euphoria. I was very, very happy. Like, my smile couldn't be wider. I don't know how to describe it, but it's as if all of the cells of my body could feel like the beauty. It's just a perfect sphere. It's just, the view is amazing. It's so beautiful. When you look at the Earth like this, you feel so well balanced, so well part of the humanity, so well part of something that looks so beautiful. And yes, for me, it was a ton of happiness.
And Jessica, of course, this is your second time on board the International Space Station. I wonder, you know, after having been there during Expeditions 61 and 62, did it feel the same when you came through the hatch and now that you've had some time to get adjusted to microgravity again? Was it like riding a bike, or was it a little bit like trying to get reacclimated to that experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it felt for me, I wasn't sure. You know, I knew I was so happy to be here with some rookies, so I could experience again what it felt like for the first time through their eyes. And I kind of wondered, was it going to be as incredible for me the second time? And I'm very happy to report that it absolutely was. It was just as magical when you're in weightlessness again and when you're looking back on the Earth again. And for returning to the ISS, it's really interesting. Really, from the very first moment we got here, you know, that was the end of a really long day. So we were a bit overtired. So I think I felt maybe a little bit out of sorts from just being so tired. But even waking up that next morning on our first day here, I literally felt like I'd never left. And I wasn't sure since, you know, it had been 6 years since I'd been up here. But just doing the different motions, like, for example, using our exercise hardware, if I had to tell you in words how I did it, like where I put my feet, I don't think I would have been able to do it. But as soon as I got back onto the machine, my body just remembered everything. You had this kind of muscle memory. And so, yeah, the whole time, all 19 days since we've been up here on ISS, it really feels like I never left, which is a really wonderful feeling because the second time, you already know all the little nuances, how to live and work in microgravity and the little nuances of space station. So it feels really great to come up here kind of already knowing that. And then also, especially to be useful to these guys in helping teach everything about space station, just what it's like to live and work in microgravity. So it's been incredibly rewarding from that mentoring perspective as well.
And Sophie, in speaking with some French media recently, you described acclimating to microgravity like being a fish in water, like it was just effortless for you. Do you point to your background as a helicopter pilot or some other part of your training that you feel may have contributed to being able to adjust to microgravity as comfortably as you did?
You know what? That's a very interesting question, and I don't think anyone will have the answer at any time. It's for me, I was prepared for the worst. I mean, as a test pilot, you always prepare for the worst, and then as soon as you're ready, you know how to handle every situation. So I prepared for being very sick. although nothing like this happened. So I think I would say it's a bit of a luck, because you know, when I was a little girl, I was very sick in the cars all the time until I was a teenager. And then later on, after being a teenager, I was never sick anymore. In helicopters, never sick. But space motion sickness is described to be very different from all the motion sickness that we have on Earth. So I thought that I would be prone to space motion sickness, but I mean, I had a good surprise, and I think it's basically luck. I don't think if any researchers has found some, direct correlation between people having motion sickness on Earth and motion sickness in space. So it's, being lucky.
Yeah, I'll add to that, seeing different people come up here. There are some people that seem incredibly comfortable from the start, and Sophie was definitely one of those people. I felt that way as well, just really kind of feeling at home. But like she said, it's really just the luck of the draw. There isn't a correlation between people who experience motion sickness in the ground and space motion sickness up here. And, there's so many individual differences in physiology that the experience is different for everyone.
Absolutely. And, we're here at the Kennedy Space Center, so apologies if some of the vehicle assembly building announcements are bleeding into my communication with you here. Speaking of vehicles coming and going, it's been a busy time at the International Space Station. We are about to see, coming up later today, I believe, the unberthing of the HTVX vehicle from Japan, and you just saw the departure of the Dragon spacecraft CRS-33 that undocked and headed back to Earth. You mentioned working out a little bit ago. I was listening back to the CRS-33 undocking, and I picked up on an interesting call where they mentioned to not do any exercise about 5 minutes before the undocking sequence began. So, Jessica, can you bring us into the moments when you're getting ready for a vehicle departing or coming? What's that like on station, even if you're not the astronaut who's actively monitoring it for the ground?
It's always super exciting because, it's not that often that we see things coming and going. And it was very strange for that Dragon experience for us. I, of course, had other visiting vehicles from that first flight that I had. We had a lot of visiting vehicles then. But this one, we never had any Dragon, of course, any Dragon crewed vehicles. So this one was interesting because we actually went into our Crew Dragon to watch the departure of the Cargo Dragon. We are up on the Zenith port, and the Crew Dragon was on the forward port. So we had a really nice view through those windows. So actually the entire crew went down there to look. We had some cameras going to get a time lapse and some still images of it happening. But it was kind of surreal to think just, a few hours before we were inside that vehicle, packing it, putting all of our things in there, and then sealing it up, and then watching it take off from the space station, detach, and depart. It's a really cool thing to witness.
I can only imagine, and you shared some really nice photos of it on your social media. So if folks haven't seen it and want to see what Jessica's talking about with the departure of Dragon from the Crew Dragon perspective, there are some great photos of that there. Going back to the idea of exercising on the space station. For those unaware, you need to do about 2 hours of activity every day to maintain the muscle and muscle mass and bone density, right, when you're on station. Sophie, going to you next. One of the pieces of hardware that you've been working with that's been on the ISS since 2023 is the ARED-K, the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device Kinematics. Given that that's one of the experiments that you've had a chance to work with as an athlete yourself, I wonder, how has that been? Given also that it's had now years to collect data, what are we learning about physiology through exercise devices like that that can be fed into further and longer space exploration for humans?
Yeah, it's a very interesting experiment. I love it because first I love all sports exercises, and when it's about physiology and learning how to be more efficient for movements, it's great. So ARED-K kinematics is a study about the physiology and the kinematics of all of the movement we do on the ARED, so the resistive exercise device that we have on board. It's basically a weightlifting machine. And so we need to learn how to be most efficient on those systems because, yeah, of course we lose bone density and muscle mass, but we want to do the exercises that enhances like the better motions and the better kinematics so that we can have less loss of bone density and muscle mass. And so it's a combined, I would say, a combined experiment where we do a ton of data gathering on Earth, in space, so that we can then assess with video recordings and really the physiology and the kinematics of all of the movements to be more efficient. It's great because it's going to enable more efficient movements in the future for very long duration exploration missions. This is what we want to prepare for the future of space exploration. But also, we could imagine that it could be very useful for Earth, like for people who have bone diseases or muscle diseases. So if we find the most efficient exercises, then we will be able to translate to them, like, what are the most efficient exercises. So it's a great experiment.
Sure sounds like it. Obviously, there's a lot on your docket coming up in the future. What's an experiment that you're most looking forward to in the near term?
Well, we've already been undergoing several experiments, especially the physiology and medical experiments, and that's because, of course, we want to collect data before the mission and then very early on in the mission so that we can compare what's happening when our bodies experience microgravity. So as a physiologist myself, of course, I get very excited about the physiology studies, and you want to collect data points at the beginning of the mission, at the middle of the mission, and, of course, toward the end of the mission to see how your body's adapting. And then, of course, that very, very critical point right when you get back to Earth and experience gravity again. So one of the experiments that we're doing is called venous flow. And this is a very important experiment physiologically because we have found some evidence of blood clot formation in microgravity. We're trying to understand more the dynamics of blood flow and why that's happening. You know, in microgravity, we have this upward fluid shift where, of course, on Earth, gravity is pulling all of the blood down toward your feet. So you have this distribution of blood flow from your head to your toes. And when we get up here and we don't have gravity, everything kind of shifts upward. So our legs look a little bit thinner, our faces look a little bit fuller because of that upward shift, and that changes some of the dynamics with blood flow. So what we're doing is we're using ultrasound to look at different blood vessels, particularly in the neck area, the jugular vein, and see differences. Some astronauts experience kind of sluggish flow, and then even kind of stagnant flow in some cases. And this, of course, could be conducive to clot formation, which could be very deleterious to our health. So this is something that it's a newer topic. We weren't monitoring it for it before, so I think just like anything on space station, you know, astronauts have probably been experiencing it without symptoms for a very long time, but we just haven't seen it because we weren't looking for it or measuring it. And so this is one of the newer things that we're looking for, just an example of one of the physiology experiments that we're doing now.
Yeah, and I could easily see how learning more about blood clot formation could easily translate to us here on Earth. So we're all very glad that we have wonderful folks like yourselves to do that work in space and allow that to translate out to the rest of us that never, unfortunately, have that opportunity. Speaking of opportunities, Jessica, I noticed some photos that you posted that were captured by your NASA colleague, Jack Hathaway, as you were, as you said, quote, in your happy space, getting your spacesuit ready for an upcoming EVA. This will be your fourth coming up here. I wonder, you know, what is it about preparing for a spacewalk that really fills you with joy, and what is it like? What goes into those, you know, days in the preceding week before you're about to embark on an EVA?
Yeah, the whole crew right now is spending some time familiarizing ourselves with procedures, getting our suits ready, even familiarizing ourselves with some of the hardware that will go outside. And yeah, like I said, it really is my happy place. It's different. It's one thing being in microgravity and looking back at the Earth, as Sophie described so eloquently, how happy that makes us. It's another feeling entirely. It's kind of next level once you go out of the airlock, and now you're just in your own little mini self-contained spacecraft with your life support system and everything that you need in that spacesuit. And now you're looking back at the Earth only through that thin visor instead of, in a larger volume looking through a window. So it feels very different psychologically, mentally, and, physically too. And it is absolutely magical. I'll never forget that first feeling. So I'm very, very much looking forward to doing more spacewalks. We've got a couple coming up here, and the crew is, getting ready to do it. Playing with some. We actually just had a session where we were putting together, assembling some of the bits of hardware that we'll be assembling on those first spacewalks for the IROSA prep, getting ready for the upgrade to the solar panels, the IROSA panels that will augment the existing solar panels on the space station. But truly magical. I hope my whole crew will get the chance to go out the door and feel that feeling, because it is truly spectacular and a highlight of the mission. Absolutely.
And we're waiting to hear more about the upcoming EVAs, and very excited for all the participants in those. Sophie, a bit of a what if question, if I may, for you. In the timeline where Crew 11 had not returned early, and those two EVAs, 94 and 95, had happened back in January, were there other EVAs that you and Crew 12 were training for that may still happen during your time on station, but just moving a little bit further into the future?
Yeah, so on the ground, we trained for a whole variety of EVAs. First, there are those contingency EVAs where every crew member trains for those. Basically, if it's there, this training is there so that we are ready in case of an emergency, a contingency happening, and us needing to go out the door to fix something on station. So we were training actively for those, and we also were training for some other bits and pieces of different EVAs that could come in the future. For now, the plan is not fully determined, and people are still working on those, but we have trained on all of the critical steps are of those upcoming EVAs, and then we'll see what the future holds for this. Of course, we're all very excited to get ready for this and to work as a crew to make those EVA happen. It's a big moment for the whole crew. I would say it's even a sort of an adventure among the biggest adventure of coming to space.
Yeah, it's never a small thing when someone goes out of the airlock there. One thing that is certain, though, Jessica, is coming up a little bit later in the expedition, before the next expedition begins, you'll be taking over as commander of the International Space Station for the first time in your career. I wonder if you've put yourself into that moment of what it's going to be like to take that ownership role of the ISS, and what does leadership in that particular responsibility mean for you?
Yeah, this mission was a big deal for me, first of all, because of being commander of the Dragon crew. That was my first command role since becoming an astronaut. And then, as you mentioned, I'll take over for the space station as well. And I think the most important aspect for me has been the one that I mentioned already, and that is the mentoring aspect. I have found it to be so incredibly rewarding getting to work with these amazing individuals. And like I mentioned, seeing it through their eyes for the first time. And just to think that I can hopefully play some kind of positive role in shaping their experience and helping them get the most out of it is really incredibly rewarding for me. Of course, it does come with a great deal of responsibility, especially when we're talking about the International Space Station and all of its elements, all of our international partners. And so that's something that, luckily I've been around the office for a long time. I've seen a lot of different commanders. I've seen how they operate. I have the experience of my previous mission and understanding what the role is, what the responsibilities are, and how to function together as a team. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And I know for me, I've been incredibly fortunate that it will be very, at least on a day-to-day, we'll see what challenges we get. But I know that it will be made easier because my crew has been so incredible. They're so competent. They work together so well. Since we've been up here, everyone is taking care of each other. Everyone's checking in on each other. Everyone's helping each other out. And that is really, I think, the key to making sure that we're a very well-oiled machine and functioning as a competent crew, but also as a happy crew.
Well, we are happy that you're happy and exceedingly happy that you've been able to join us today on this Thursday, March 5th. Sophie Adenot from the European Space Agency, NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today here at Spaceflight Now. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kim. We really appreciate it as well.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event.
Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.